This video, he showed up to a home on the city's east side saying he needed help with his car. The husband wasn't home at the time. Then he came home. He went out and helped Khalees, but then he locked the husband out of the home. And as you see, started to go upstairs where the wife was home alone. The husband kicked the door in, got into an altercation with Miller. As you can see, drug him down the stairs and beat him up pretty good. And he was since arrested and now has pleaded guilty to burglary and assault. Let's take you live now to the sentencing.
Rehabilitation and providing for restitution. Court must and has considered the seriousness and recidivism factors relevant to the offense and the offender pursuant to 292912. And I will ensure that the sentence being imposed does not demean the seriousness of the crime and the impact it has on the victims, and is consistent with other similar offenses committed by like offenders. Finally, the sentence is not based on any impermissible purposes, namely the race, ethnic background, gender, or religion. Okay, you understand all that, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
So what's going to happen is the state's going to put on its presentation, and then we'll turn over to your table for whatever your lawyer has. I would indicate for purposes of the record that prior to coming in here, the court has made available and has reviewed in detail the pre-sentence investigation. Has everybody had a chance to see that?
Yes, sir.
I have also reviewed the task assessment that was prepared back in June of 2023, and that is for people that are not sure what task does. They do drug and alcohol assessments for us. Also had that report, have read that in great detail. So with that, everybody's ready to go forward. I'll turn it over to the state of Ohio.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Miller previously pled guilty to one count of burglary, felony, and second degree, and one count of assault and misdemeanor of the first degree. There is a presumption of prison in this case, and it's the state's position that Mr. Miller is not amenable to community control, and the state is requesting a prison sanction in this case. Based on Mr. Miller's extensive criminal history, a high risk of recidivism, the seriousness of the offense, as well as the impact on the victim. Excuse me. This incident occurred May 5th of 2023. It was about 1 p.m. Mr. Miller actually came to the victim's residence earlier in that morning, made contact with the victim's wife. He asked her for help with his car. She said, "My husband's not home. I'll see, when he comes home, if he can help you with your car." He came home. He did, in fact, help Mr. Miller with his car. Hours later, Mr. Miller came back to the victim's home and was banging on the door. And at that time, the victim was actually home, and Mr. Miller again asked for help with his car again. Victim went outside and again to help him with his car. And as soon as he went outside, Mr. Miller went inside the victim's home, locked our victim out of the house, such that the victim had to break the door down break the door down to his own house in order to get in. At the same time that he was breaking the door down to get into his own house, Mr. Miller was, despite hearing the victim banging, knocking on his own door and screaming, "Get out of my house, get out of my house," he's going up the stairs towards the victim's wife, who's also screaming, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of my house." And nothing's happening. There's nothing. He's not there. There's no response from him. He's not leaving. He's not turning around. He's not upset. He's not scared. Nothing's happening. There's no emotion on his end. He continues going up the stairs. Victim breaks the door down to his own house. He also follows him up the stairs, and a struggle ensues. Eventually, Mr. Adams, the victim, who's also actually present in court today, is finally successful in forcibly removing Mr. Miller from his home. So this was all just a ruse, it's the state's position, this was all just a ruse to get into the victim's home. We're not really quite sure for what reason, but it was ill-intended. Mr. Miller has an extensive criminal history, Your Honor, and it's all, this is based on the pre-sentence investigation that we all received and reviewed. His criminal history, yes, it's largely drug-related offenses, but there's also some violent offenses, ranging from disorderly conducts in the early 2000s to domestic violence, 2012, 2021. But if you look at the last 2 years, there's an uptick in both violent behavior as well as the frequency of that violent behavior. In 2022, December 6th actually, in case number CR 22-673-341, Judge Nancy Russo saw Mr. Miller and sentenced him to 6 months county jail on a felony 5 CCW offense. I believe he had credit for 41 days or so on that case, and that was December 6th. The incident, the date of the offense in this incident was May 5th of 2023. He was seemingly just out of county jail when he commits this offense. He's on PCP when he commits this offense, and it's a horrific burglary. And Your Honor, I will let you know, I do have an approximately 2-minute home video. It was caught on home surveillance, this incident. I would like to play that for the court once I finish up here before the victim has a chance to speak. And this is a horrific burglary. This is a horrific incident. He is on PCP when this occurs, and that just doesn't excuse what happened. But like you said, he's seemingly fresh out of county jail for an already violent behavior or violent action, having it's a weapons offense. And he does something like this. He just really can't be trusted. Also, according to the pre-sentence investigation, as well as the task assessment, we already know that Mr. Miller has been using drugs for several years, namely PCP, which is a dangerous drug. It causes people to behave erratically. He's also been abusing alcohol. Well, we all know addiction is a struggle. How long is he going to use his addiction as an excuse for his bad actions? His actions on this day, Your Honor, were horrific, they were horrible, and they greatly impacted this family. And you're going to hear from them today. Again, he's abusing these dangerous drugs, and he's behaving erratically in the community, and it just isn't safe for anyone that around him. According to the PSI, his recidivism risk level is high. And again, the victims are present, and I believe Mr. Adams would like to be heard. At this time, Your Honor, if I may just present State's Exhibit 1.
Come on up to the podium. You're going to show this first?
Yes.
Well, excuse me. Yeah. So we have to move it up so we can see it. Okay.
Is this okay, Your Honor?
Let's see what it looks like.
Your Honor, it was working on my laptop. Would it be okay if I just came up to the bench and put it on my laptop? Counsel President.
Great.
This video has already been provided in discovery.
Yeah.
Dan DeRosa with 19 News. The prosecutor having a little problem playing the video. We've obtained the video from Mr. Adams himself when we did the story at the time. So the video we've been showing you is exactly what the judge is about to see here. So we'll just keep showing that video as the judge is watching it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Sue, let the record reflect, I just viewed a video.
We're going to mark it as Court's Exhibit Number 1. I've asked that the prosecutor deliver a copy of that to your office later today, okay? So it'll be part of the record.
Thank you. Your Honor. Thank you. This time, Your Honor, Mr. Bertie Adams would like to be heard.
Okay, Mr. Adams, come forward, please. So first of all, Mr. Adams, thanks for coming down here today, all right? It's very important that the community come to the court, and we want you to explain exactly what happened here, whatever you have to say. But first, would you tell us your first and last name?
My name's Verdi Adams.
What's your first name?
Verdi, V-E-R-D-I.
V-E-R-D-I.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Adams.
I don't stop and not help anybody. If somebody comes up to me and they need help, that's what I do. I help them. I've been that way for years. I got out of prison in 2019, and the only thing I wanted to do was get my life right and start things over and just do things right by people. So I started doing that. So on this day, my wife called me and said somebody was there and needed help. The only thing I did was just go there and try and help. And not once, but twice, you know.
Did you know Mr. Miller?
No, I hadn't really known him. Yeah, I'd seen the vehicle on the street within the past couple of days that it had been there, but I didn't take any real notice to him. You know what I'm saying? I hadn't spoken to him or anything. I just went on about my business. I'm a local mechanic. I work on everybody's cars. I mean, I'm always turning wrench. So I mean, that's all changed. I don't even do that anymore. I don't throw myself at the mercy of helping people like I used to. It's just not right. You know, my wife is dealing with her own struggles with this, and I mean, it has affected my family. It's displaced my entire world. And I mean, I did drugs when I was in my youth, and I never, ever put somebody's life in a way of harm like this. And at best, I can say that I'm glad that I'm a felon and I wasn't carrying a gun, because I saved that man's life, because the other side of me would have handled what he had to handle. My wife tells me constantly that I did the right thing. I can only hope that he finds peace in himself and that he makes a straighter path, because I mean, I don't want to see anybody spend any amount of time behind these walls, because I've done it myself. But for what was done, I helped that man, and this is how I was paid. I didn't ask him for anything when I helped him. I didn't ask for a dime, and this is how I was repaid. I mean, I just ask that you impose a fair sentence and get him the help that he needs. He just, you know, he's...
So you've been involved in the system, okay?
Yeah.
So you know that I had a pre-sentence investigation, okay?
Yes, sir.
And it details years and years of alcohol, drug abuse, domestic violence, and then there's some of the cases like we have in front of us today.
Yes, sir.
But more so the other ones. I got a task assessment, okay? It gives a pretty good assessment of what his issues are. I got also, I didn't indicate earlier, but I also had a report from Oriana House about CBCF, which involves a 30-day treatment program, along with other things, issues that they discussed during the 60 days or so that they're at that facility, which is a lockdown facility, all right? So I have options of just sending them to prison, okay? I have options of sending them to CBCF, and my thought had been, before you testified, if I sent him to CBCF when I brought him, when he was released from there, I'd probably send him to inpatient treatment, try to get him some long-term treatment, so 30, 60 days, and then to go to sober house and see if I could get him sober. All right? And then that's the treatment side of it, or I could send him down to prison. And what do you think is going to happen in prison relative to drug treatment?
Nothing good will come of it.
You know? So the other thing is, sir, is that if I go ahead on the treatment side, I still have everything that in my disposal to send him to prison if he violates. It doesn't change. So you want to go back and talk to your wife and see what her opinion would be? I mean, I would really like your input, because you are giving me a fresh input. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Dan DeRosa with 19 News here. Really unique exchange between the judge and this victim. This is a victim who admitted in court that he's been through this himself, drug addiction, spent time in prison. He's a felon. Basically said that Miller is thankful, and Miller should be lucky that he was a felon because he couldn't carry a gun and he would have taken care of business. The judge asking Adams and his wife what he thinks they should do.
Sir, ultimately, it's my job, okay?
I know,
So you don't,
I know.
if you care not to express your opinion, then you don't have to.
Here's my take on CBCF. It's a facility ran by babysitters. I've been there. I did that. And I don't, you know, you can take a fish to water. You can get them to swim in it, but you can't bring them on land and expect them to walk, because that's not what they're going to do. You throw somebody in a rehab, the first day they get a chance to go out, they reoffend, or they get high, or they do something stupid. Then it looks bad on a guy like me for not manning up and saying what my wife said. So my wife doesn't see fit. That drug, just the drug rehab for 30 days and then inpatient or whatever, it just, I got to go with.
All right, I appreciate your concern. And I would say to you, so you understand is what I do for a living here, okay, in sentencing. So I have positive outcomes in drug rehab,
Absolutely.
and I have negative outcomes, okay? If I went through my docket, if I could search my docket for the whole year, I think I've had so far this year 2 or 3 abated by death, which means that before we could come in and get the case resolved, they've overdosed.
Right.
You know, I run a drug court, okay, for high-risk offenders. And in that drug court, we have people that come to the box. That's called the honor box, okay? It could be 30 days that they've been in the program after treatment or 60 days. And then every now and then they end up in the backs where they're not in the honor box because they tested positive, okay?
Yeah.
Brought a guy back from prison so far. Put him into the box, you know, got him treatment. Brought him in. I told him I would do that when he went to prison. And right now he's on a capias. He went out on a frolic. But you know, what I try to do is I try to work with everybody individually, okay?
Yes, understandable.
But I need input from the community on this case, and I have it. So thank you very much. Okay?
Thank you,
Mr. Adams. Mary Ann? That it?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll turn it over to Rachel.
Yes, Your Honor. I will start with, I don't think there's any question that Mr. Miller has a serious drug abuse problem. I think the state would admit to that, and certainly Mr. Miller would. You know, and obviously the issue is that his addiction is to PCP, which is a very dangerous drug, as well as alcohol abuse. I think that sending him to prison would just exacerbate that issue, and this is not a life-tail crime. He would be back in the community after prison, and I think sending him to prison would just, he would just come out with worse issues rather than with a better mindset. You know, I'm asking the court to consider a non-prison sanction. Specifically, you know, we were asking for CBCF. I was going to also ask for, as you said, the inpatient treatment. Mr. Miller, although he's clearly had a substance abuse issue for a very long time, has never actually undergone residential inpatient treatment. So I think that this would be, you know, the state is saying, you know, they made a statement that, you know, he can't keep using this as an excuse, but I don't think he has ever used this as an excuse. I think this is his first time really confronting his addiction issues and sort of wanting to combat them. Obviously, he does have a fairly extensive history, but it's a majority substance abuse crimes like drug possession and OVI, open container, disorderly conduct, that sort of thing. Mr. Miller is 46 years old. He did graduate from Shaw High School. He does have considerable family support. His mother, Lisa Ford, is in the courtroom. She would like to speak. His brother, Lano Miller, as well as sister-in-law Danielle Miller are here, as well as I believe his cousin. His cousin, so she came in after we were already up here, but his cousin is here as well. He would be able to live with his mother if, you know, once he is released. I believe at the time of this case, he was not living with his mother. He was living on his own, but I think he's, again, realized that he might need a little bit more help. Although he doesn't have a qualifying MHDD diagnosis, he is linked up with Murtis Taylor for a PTSD diagnosis. He's been shot more than once in his life, which I think does go into where these issues stem from. My social worker did speak with his case manager there. I believe that once he is released, he will still have those services, and they can also be a liaison for substance abuse services. You know, as the PSI indicates, he's been using PCP since he was 19 years old. However, he's never gone to residential drug treatment. You know, in terms of this case, I mean, I understand the state's position and the victim's position that this is obviously a very scary incident, but I think the incident itself points to a serious drug issue. Mr. Miller, when he explained to me what he remembers, it's very clear that he was not in his right mind. He has very little memory of the incident, and his memory is that he found himself in the house and was trying to get out, and then next thing he knows he's being tackled, which is, I think, indicative of somebody who wasn't really aware of what was going on. I think that's also shown by the fact that they're yelling and yelling and yelling at him, and he's not saying anything or doing anything. He's just sort of almost catatonic. The state wants to say it's a ruse to get into the victim's home, but there was no actual threats made. There was no injuries. Any injuries were from when he was tackled, right? It wasn't necessarily from him, actually doing anything. From my understanding, ultimately, I understand this is a serious offense, so we're not asking for no sanctions, obviously. We're asking, I think that CBCF is sort of, it's still a lockdown facility. I think it can be up to 90 days, is my understanding. And in addition, just for the record, under 2929.13F6, this is not, although it's a presumption of prison, this is not a mandatory prison situation. He has no prior F1s or 2s. And I think that, the presumption of prison is rebuttable. Looking at the factors that the court needs to consider, Mr. Miller was not on bail or awaiting sentence or on community control or PRC. To my understanding, at the time of this offense, although he has a criminal history, the majority of his history is misdemeanors, F4s, F5s. He, has never had inpatient treatment, and he is acknowledging and, begging the court for treatment. I do believe that he shows genuine remorse. He has indicated, to me, and I believe he will speak today about, certainly he had no intention to sort of put the victims in the position that they were, and does certainly feel bad about what happened. I think that a sober Collis Miller would not have been in this situation. He might have gone to Mr. Adams to help, fix his car, but he certainly would not have done anything else. I think that a sober Collis Adams is very unlikely to be back in this courtroom or in this courthouse. Further, I don't think that a CBCF sentence, and inpatient treatment would demean any of the seriousness of the offense. Again, I don't believe there were any serious injuries. There's no restitution. Mr. Miller's obviously not in the public office. There was no relationship. And in terms of there was no intent that can be proven or that was there for Mr. Miller to cause any harm to Mr. and Mrs. Adams. This was a situation where he was intoxicated, wasn't in his right mind, and obviously voluntary intoxication is not a defense, but I think it does go to the fact that, he was not really thinking clearly, obviously. I think that would be considered substantial grounds to mitigate his conduct. And again, he has, I believe he will say himself, but I do believe he has genuine remorse for this situation. In addition, I counted 128 days of jail time.
So we counted?
Sorry?
That's what we counted.
Okay, perfect, because I wasn't 100% sure on my math, but then I counted 128 days of jail time credit. I was hoping, again, I would ask Your Honor for a sentence to CBCF, inpatient treatment, or maybe even drug court if he would be eligible for that. I do believe Mr. Miller, as well as his mother, would like to speak.
Sure. Whatever, you want to go with his mother first, and then
Sure.
we'll give Mr. Miller the last chance? Ma'am, come on forward. Hi.
How you
State
doing?
your first and last name.
My name is Lisa Ford.
Lisa,
Yes, sir. Lisa, Lisa.
what's your second name?
Ford, F-O-R-D.
Got it.
Honorable Judge McGinty, this has been a long struggle for a year and a half. I've been trying to help my son, and this drug is it's a demon, and it's nothing I could do. I need my son to get treatment. I apologize to Mr. Adams and his wife, for what has taken place, because I wouldn't have wanted to be in that place. And also, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to eliminate. Let me say that what my son did was not wrong, because it was, but it was due to his impairment that I have been telling the other judge before you and the other judge before that he needs intensive treatment, where he cannot come out like you're saying, and he cannot be around these people that helps enable him to get these drugs. It's a terrible thing to see your oldest child enabled by a demonic drug such as PCP. I just couldn't see myself putting something in me that they put in dead people. My heart goes out to the whole situation, Your Honorable Judge, even you being the one that have to make the decision about what goes on afterwards. I just ask that my son be granted a long-term treatment, even if he have to be on probation. I just want to see him well again, because I don't know him as the person he is now. And so I'm just asking for help. That's all I want to say, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I understand exactly everything that you said.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Miller, what do you have to say?
Basically, everything my attorney said was true. I mean, I've been dealing with a drug problem, since I've been 19 or whatever, and I never had no intentions of going to their house, to cause no harm. I went there to get my car fixed, and by the time I got there, like they said, the drug got kicked in, and I didn't even know I was in their house. By the time I looked up, I was getting attacked, and I wondered how I got charged with assault, because I'm the one that got attacked, but I understand why I got attacked. I was inside somebody's house, residence that I wasn't supposed, but what I'm trying to say is I was under the influence. I wasn't in my right state of mind. I ain't even, while I was going up the stairs, I didn't know where I was at. I was trying to get out their house. And by the time I looked up, I was getting attacked, and then I looked up.
But when you did go into the house, you locked the door.
I didn't even know I was in the house. Last thing I remember talking to him on the porch.
I'm just saying, the video shows you locked.
I know.
You locked the door.
But I wasn't
The
in my...
man went out the door and he couldn't get back in because it was locked. I didn't see it locked, but I assumed that you locked the door.
I don't even remember locking no door. I don't even remember turning the knob. I just know that I ran out the house. I was not in my right state of mind at all.
Okay, so
I did go to their house and ask for help with my car. He helped me. I tried to offer him some money. He wouldn't take it. Then I went back down there to get something fixed on my license plate. Man was talking, and that's the last thing I remember.
okay. So, sir, there's been a lot of talk today at the sentencing hearing about your prior record, okay? Mm-hmm. And it looks to me like your first case goes back to sometime in June of 1995. What year were you born in?
77.
Okay. So your 18th year, you were started off with a drug possession. Do you remember what your first drug was?
What, using?
Yeah.
I think marijuana.
Okay. And then you had another felony drug possession
A week later, you got charged with another one. Oh, these were over in juvenile court. This was before you were 18. You remember those?
No.
Okay. Do you remember in 97 you had an alcohol by a minor in Cleveland Muni?
No.
And in 97 you also had a domestic violence?
I don't even remember that.
Okay, it was arrested and released. I just wondered if you remember. In 97 you had an open container?
I can't remember that.
Okay. In 97, and 2 days before Christmas, he had a domestic violence in Youngstown Municipal Court. Remember being in Youngstown?
I remember being in Youngstown. I don't remember half of them girls, let alone the cases.
Okay. And there was a robbery charge where the case was dismissed. There was a grand theft motor vehicle. These were in 98. Then in June of 98, you had a drug abuse marijuana in Cleveland Municipal. Remember that?
No.
Okay. 3 weeks later, you got charged with drug-related activity. Remember that?
Back in 98? No.
So, and then we had an OVI, some more
I
marijuana.
remember the OVI in Wickford.
You remember that one?
Willowwood, I remember that.
Okay. And you got 90 days in jail?
Yeah.
Okay, when you came out, your drug and alcohol counseling was ordered?
I don't remember the drug and alcohol being ordered.
Okay. And then so then obviously you started using again. Okay. Then we had preparation of drugs for sale in 99. And that was a felony of the 5th degree. And what was that? Was that marijuana?
Yes.
Okay, did you have a number of packets in your pocket?
Really, it wasn't mine. It was my friend. I didn't want to,
Okay. Then we had another disorderly conduct, and that goes on for years, okay? I mean, I'm not going to go through them all.
Right.
It just goes on and on and on. But I do want to go forward to 2021. There was a couple, you had a domestic violence again in Paynesville. Remember that?
I've never had a domestic violence in pain.
I'm sorry?
I ain't never did no 90 days in pain.
Well, they suspended the 90 days. When they suspended the 90 days.
Yeah, I never did no 90 days in pain.
Well, the reason why they suspended it, so everybody knows, is because it was COVID time. And we were trying to keep people out of jail. Remember that?
No, I paid a fine for that. My baby mom had
Okay, all right. So, sir, you don't have to believe me, but I'm telling you that's probably the reason why you didn't do 90
okay.
days, okay? Then we had a criminal trespass at that same time. We had a criminal mischief in, looks like February 22.
can I speak?
Sure, yeah.
On that Painesville thing, it wasn't no domestic violence ever occurred. I went there and they didn't give me no trespassing because she told me they told me I was banned from the property. I want to go see my daughter. I never hit nobody, was never no domestic violence. I don't even know why that's on my record. I went there to take my daughter shopping.
Are we in the Paynesville one?
Yeah.
Or the Mentor one? Which one are you talking about?
I ain't never had no domestic in Painesville or Mentor.
Okay. So the record would reflect that on 4/9/21, he was charged with domestic violence that was resolved in Paynesville Municipal Court on 9/27/21, where he was found guilty, sentenced to 90 days in jail. That was suspended. He was placed on 6 months non-reporting probation, no contact with the victim. Do you remember that now?
Only thing I had with Painesville was a criminal trespass. I don't know where the domestic violence
All
coming
right,
from.
all right. And then we came down in August of 2022, you had a domestic, having the weapons under disability and receiving stolen property, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let me ask you back then, you were, you entered into a plea bargain. Were you using drugs back then?
I don't think so.
No?
So when did this drug issue just start that brings us before the court today?
Probably when I started losing, lost my job and stuff like that, you know. Just wasn't able to get no money and just resorted back to the streets and drugs.
Okay, but from when you pled guilty and Judge,
So,
yes, and then to when you picked up this case on 5/5/23, is that when you started using?
I never really stopped.
Well, that's what I asked you. When did you start with the PCP?
Like I said, when I was 19, I never stopped using it.
Okay, all right. But my point is to you is that you came in contact with many different agencies, remember? Judges, probation departments. All right. Did you ever ask for treatment back then?
No.
Okay. This is the first time you were asking for treatment.
Yes.
Okay. And would it be a fair statement to say this is the worst of the cases to which you've been charged?
Yes.
Okay? You heard what was said in court here today by that young lady back there is frightened in the arms of her husband right now. You see that?
Yes.
Okay?
I
That was,
never intended to frighten nobody.
I understand that, okay? All right?
I'm listening.
Sometimes people, they shoot and they say, well, I didn't mean to hit anybody. But if the bullet hits somebody, you're responsible for the shot. You agree with me? Okay? Nobody had a gun to your head at that time when you went in the house, right? When you took those drugs that you took them voluntarily.
Volunteer.
So that's the problem the court has faced with here today, okay? I have a young lady right here in her own home. I learned as a young lawyer one time, the community takes offenses against their residences very seriously. And you know why that is? Because when you come home and you come into your house, and it's your home and you lock the door, that's your place, right?
Yep.
You go upstairs and put your sweatpants on if you want. You can put your jeans on if you want. You walk around in your underwear if you want, right? Because that's the solace of our residence. And you violated that to these people, okay? And so, having said that, I think that, sir, you know, when I read the reports that we had in here, right here, I thought there was a chance that we could go with some treatment. But having heard from the victims in this case and the state's input and talking to you, I think that a prison sentence is necessary, okay? So it will be the sentence of the court as to the felony 2 robbery, that you'll be sentenced to a minimum of 3 to a maximum of 4.5 years, and that's under Reagan-Totes. Sir, I'll explain to you the minimum 3-year sentence means is that absent doing anything else, you'll be any good works while you're in prison, you'll be released on that day, less than the amount of time you served going in. All right, so you have 128 days already. That'll be subtracted from your sentence. If you do good stuff while you're in prison, if you try to do every program that you could in prison, you'll get benefit for it. And then that presumed release date will get to be a better date. It'll be a lower date. So the more active you are in prison trying to get help, the better off your sentence will be. The maximum date, 4.5 years, is that if you do bad acts while you're in prison and that you're brought up on charges and the prison system thinks that you are not ready for release, they'll file appropriate paperwork and they'll keep you up to a maximum of 4.5 years under the Reagan-Totes sentencing. Do you understand that? Post-release control is a portion of that sentence. In this case right here, post-release control is, I think, mandatory 18 months to a maximum of 3 years, which means that upon your release from prison, you'll be subject to post-release control under the authority of the Adult Parole Authority. If you don't follow the rules and regulations of their programming for you, if you don't follow your supervision, they can ask that you be brought before the board, that's the parole board again. If they find you to be in violation of your post-release control supervision, they could return you to prison for up to 1/2 the original sentence that I gave you. Do you understand that? And up to 1/2 of that original sentence, they could never do it more than 9 months per violation.
So the maximum they can violate you at any one time is 9 months. Do you understand that? Sir, while on post-release control, if you commit any felony offense, if you appear before a common pleas judge for sentencing, that judge would have the authority, if you committed a crime on post-release control, to sentence you consecutively for a 1-year sentence, or take the unused portion of your supervised release time, convert that to a prison sentence in order that to be run consecutive to the new charge. Do you understand that? If you fail to go see your post-release control officer, you could be indicted for the crime of escape, which is a felony, and I just told you what happens if you commit a felony while on post-release control. The court will give you 128 days credit on from being in the jail waiting plea and sentencing on this case, and as to the assault charge, we'll give you credit for time served. Sir, while you're in prison, I'm going to help you. I'm going to order that you pay the court costs by doing community work service inside the jail, which means that every month that you do good works, you'll get credit off your court costs that I'm ordering right here. They'll set that aside and notify the clerk's office, okay? So you'll be able to work that off, and at the same time, it gets you in the habit of doing good things. All right? Do you have any questions before you go?
I don't believe this.
Okay, great. Good luck to you, sir. Having nothing else before the court will be off the record. Thank you to the Adamses for coming down here.
Dan DeRosa with 19 News. As you see, Mr. Miller being taken away from court. It was really touch and go there. The judge looked like he was going to take some sympathy on this man who has an extensive criminal record, domestic violence, numerous drug charges, OVI charges. And you heard from, and you see the Adams there. Mr. Adams and his wife that were in attendance. What an incredible statement from Verdi Adams there, the man you see who admitted in court that he himself has been through this, had a drug problem, had served some prison time. He's a felon, and he told the judge that thankfully he was a felon and was not allowed to be in possession of a gun. Otherwise, he would have probably used that gun to shoot and kill Miller in the house that day. And as you watch the video, and you heard the judge say this, your home is sacred. This is where you're supposed to be safe. There is Verdi Adams going out to help, and here comes Miller. He's now locked Adams out of the house. And in fact, if you keep an eye on the right side, you see a little bit of glass fly in there. That's when Verdi Adams kicked in the door. Then he ran upstairs after Miller, and you can see gives him a pretty good beat down. You actually heard Miller trying to say he was the one who was attacked that day. He pulled it back a little bit. You don't exactly want to try and paint yourself as the victim in a case like this. Given 3 years plus probation, the judge was awfully close to sending him to an inpatient 30-day drug treatment facility. His mother was begging for that, asking for that, but Verdi Adams said his wife said that's not enough for the destruction of her feeling safe in her own home, that knowing that this man was just going to some sort of inpatient treatment center for 30 days was not enough. And the judge really flipped there at the end, I think, because of what Verdi Adams and his wife mentioned in court. The judge went and gave him, said that prison was mandatory and necessary in this point, not mandatory, but necessary, and gave him 3 years. If we have any other breaking news or sentencings or any kind of court, we'll bring it to you here on our digital platforms live. Otherwise, our 11 o'clock news is coming up in just about a half an hour on CW43, then our noon news on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRosa with 19 News. Have a good afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media